Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. And we are here with some wonderful Karen Reed news that makes things so much more spicy, if somehow that was even possible. We have turned the heat level up on this trial because Mr. Proctor himself, the lead investigator, has been fired. It's very, very sad. Very, very sad. And we are going to read this order. Can't pull it up on screen, but I'll read it to you. It's very short. It's a 3-page order from the Department of the State Police Personnel Order on Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, in number 25 PER 179. The subject, dishonorable discharge. Oh, yeah. In accordance with MGL and the rules and regulations governing the Massachusetts State Police, the below named officer is hereby dishonorably discharged, effective Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Proctor Michael D., ID number 3863 Trooper. Official Jeffrey D. Noble, the Colonel/Superintendent. Exciting. The order continues. Subject, Trial Board Finding. The findings of the Trial Board held January 15th, 2025, February 10th, 2025, and March 13th, 2025, in pursuit of Personnel Order 25 PER 005, dated January 6, 2025, having been approved by the Colonel Superintendent, Trooper Michael D. Proctor, ID number 3863, is hereby found as to Charge 1, Specification 1, guilty. Specification 2, guilty. Specification 3, guilty. And as to Charge 2, Specification 1, guilty. Trooper Proctor, on various dates between January 29th, 2022 and August 17th of 2022, did fail to conform to the work standards established for members' rank, title, or position, and or did fail to take appropriate action on occasion of crime, disorder, or other condition deserving state police attention. This occurred when Trooper Proctor, while assigned as lead investigator in a homicide investigation, which one, unspecified, sent derogatory, defamatory, disparaging, and otherwise inappropriate text messages about a suspect in that investigation to other individuals. This is a direct violation of Article 5.8.2. This is a Class A violation. Trooper Proctor, on various dates between January 29th, 2022 and June 9th, 2022, did fail to conform to work standards established for members' rank, title, or position, and or did fail to take appropriate action on the occasion of a crime, disorder, or other condition deserving state police attention. This occurred when Trooper Proctor, while assigned as the lead investigator in a homicide investigation, provided sensitive and or confidential information about a homicide victim, potential witness, and or potential investigative steps in the investigation to non-law enforcement personnel. This action is in direct violation of Article 5.8.2. This is a Class A violation. Trooper Proctor, through his actions on various dates between January 29th, 2022 and August 17th of 2022, did fail to conform to the work standards established for the members' rank, title, or position, and or did fail to take appropriate action on the occasion of a crime, disorder, or other condition deserving police attention. This occurred when Trooper Proctor, while assigned as the lead investigator in a homicide investigation, through his unprofessional and inappropriate conduct, created an image that he was biased in his dealings with a homicide suspect and or brought otherwise himself and the Massachusetts State Police into disrepute. This action is in direct violation of Article 5.8.2. This is a Class A violation. Trooper Proctor, on July the 19th of 2022, did consume alcohol while on duty and not in the performance of duty, and while acting under specific orders from a supervisory member or police proper authority. This occurred when Trooper Proctor consumed alcoholic beverages while eating dinner on duty and then proceeded to operate his department-issued cruiser. This action is in violation of Article 5.10.4. This is a Class B violation. Trooper Michael D. Proctor, ID number 3863, as a result of his actions, shall A, be terminated / dishonorably discharged. Signed, Jeffrey Noble, the Colonel and Superintendent. Super duper exciting. So, the trooper Proctor drama and the Karen Read drama has reached a new crescendo, which is super exciting because now we're not just talking about an investigation. Now we're not just talking about, things are in the wind. Now we have a finding from the person after due process, which of course in relation to this is not the same thing as being criminally convicted because he's not being charged with a crime. So the standard is not beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know exactly what the standard is relevant to this. I'd have to go check the finer points of the state law, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. But there is due process. He's entitled to a hearing. He had a hearing. He was able to present evidence and all those things. And as a result of those things, he's been found guilty, which, I'll take some exception to, I suppose, because that implies criminal guilt. But that's not what they mean. They mean he's guilty of violating the rules of conduct. So I'm not sure guilty is necessarily the right word, but that's what they wrote, so whatever. In any event, we now have a determination from a competent legal authority in this domain that he has violated the rules. So now we have this determination that could potentially now lead itself to being used in the Karen Read trial. And one of the things I imagine the defense is going to want to do, and one of the things the prosecution is not going to want to do, is the defense is going to want to ask many exciting questions relating to exactly this. Probably, if they can get Trooper Proctor himself to read it into the record when he's inevitably called to the stand. Because how do you not call Michael Proctor to the stand if you're the Commonwealth? He's the lead investigator. How do you not call Trooper Proctor to the stand? Because he's your linchpin that brings everything together, not to mention, of course, his own involvement in the case. So it's like, don't you have to call Trooper Proctor if you're the Commonwealth? It's like, how do you not call him? And even if you don't, as the defense, I'd be tempted to call him just so that I could embarrass the shit out of him. And that sounds like fun. So first of all, I don't think the Commonwealth can't, because I don't know how they can do this in a way that makes any sense without the lead investigator. That seems really problematic. And once he's on the stand, whether it's because the defense wanted it or because the Commonwealth wanted it, either way, the defense is going to want to ask him many exciting questions because they'll be calling him Mr. Proctor when he's on the stand. It will be Mr. Proctor now, if you don't mind. And so I'd like to call Mr. Proctor to the stand. And one of the questions the defense is going to want to ask is, hey, didn't you used to be called Trooper Proctor? Didn't that used to be your title? What happened with that? Why are you no longer Trooper Proctor? Why are you now Mr. Proctor? Can you tell us more? And so it'll be interesting, I'm sure, because the Commonwealth is going to want to file a motion in limine immediately, preventing the defense from saying as much as they can. They're probably not going to be able to avoid saying, didn't used to be true, well, because he's going to be on the stand, right, as the lead investigator. And it's like, we're calling you Mr. Proctor. Is there any particular reason why? So I don't know that we can get past that question. But whether or not we can get into the specific findings relating to this, whether or not they can read this into the record, whether or not they can call, like, the colonel or something to testify to it, or whatever, as the business record, whether or not they can do all those things, I'm sure it's going to be much fought over. It's going to be incredibly, incredibly fought over as to whether or not how much they can embarrass this guy on the stand. And it'll be, of course, interesting, as always, to see how Bev rules on this, because Bev now has a real problem. Because the credibility of Proctor is really key. And again, it's not just he was involved in this Sandra Birchmore thing, and this is kind of sketchy, and, weird shenanigans happened, and therefore Proctor is somehow implicated by that, right? It's a little fuzzy. It's a little fuzzy. But here we have something much more concrete because, again, we have an actual determination by the competent legal authority that he violated the rules after due process and has been dishonorably discharged for those reasons. And so that's kind of a big deal. That's a big deal. So yeah, did I see the motion to continue? I did not see the motion to continue. Well, I saw it, but I didn't read it. So they did. So they want to continue. Did they specify until when? Incidentally, in the motion, I mean, it's going to be subject to the judge, and whether or not, of course, the judge allows them to continue is a whole other set of issues. Because as I'm sure you'll recall, last time around, both the Commonwealth and the defense wanted to continue, and the defense is like, nah. So whether or not they'll be allowed to continue, of course, still very much in the air. So last time there was an uncontested motion to continue, and the judge was like, nah, we're not doing that. Which, incidentally, by the way, from first principles, I don't necessarily object to. Whether or not it was unduly hasty in that case is something that would be more fact-specific, so I haven't really analyzed that question. But I don't really mind a judge at some point just being like, no, it's time to fish or cut bait, choo-choo, it's let's move the train time, put up or shut up, I'm tired of this bullshit. So I don't really mind it in principle. Whether or not that's the correct decision, of course, is a whole other set of problems, but yeah. So that's exciting. So Trooper Proctor, Mr. Proctor, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get used to saying it. I have to get used to saying it. Mr. Proctor's retaking the stand, I'm sure, will be fun and exciting with much frivolity to be had. Yeah. Until the First Circuit makes a decision, I'm fairly confident the First Circuit is going to deal with the appeal fairly summarily. And they're not going to obviously depend on the fact the judge is moving the date. They're going to want to make a decision before April 1st. And I'm anticipating the First Circuit is going to make a decision basically in a one paragraph, being basically like, we're good. So that's what I'm anticipating to occur. And so I don't think the First Circuit is going to stop this train. So only Bev can stop this train at this point. So exciting and fun. All kinds of good times. Commonwealth is opposed, but appellate team for them wants it. Well, that's neither here nor there. The appellate team can't direct the trial team. So the appellate team's wishes in this domain doesn't affect what the prosecutor says. Like, that would be a reason for them to do it. But it's the prosecutor's call, right? If we were in appellate court, then it's the appellate team's call because they're the lawyers in the appellate court. So, but they can't direct the trial team in terms of what they want. They talk to each other, but ultimately it's each team's call. So, yeah. So that's how that works. The appellate team wants more time because they want more time for their briefing. They don't want to brief on an expedited schedule, which I appreciate because it's a very tight schedule. To be able to get it done by April 1st is a very tight schedule. The appellate team doesn't really want to rush it because they want to have, the normal amount of time so that they can make the best legal arguments that they can. Of course they do. They want as much time as they can. I'd want as much time as I can. It's like normally normally you're on like, it's like 21 days to file this and 10 days to file this and 7 days to file this and all the rest of it, right? Normally it's like a more expedited time frame. And now it's like, how about file the appeal brief in like 5 days? That's not a fun position for a lawyer to be in. No one wants to be in that position. That's not super fun, happy time. So of course the appellate team wants more. But whether or not they get it is a whole other set of problems. The brief for the Commonwealth is due on Monday? Sounds right. Yep, that sounds right. Yeah, the First Circuit is chewing this thing. It's like we are moving this thing forward. Normally things work on a slower pace, sometimes even glacially so. But sometimes when courts really want to, they can ball. They can ball. Like, I don't know if it's the record, but it's got to be close. Like, the all-time fastest from case being filed in district court to decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. So you went all the way from, I have a lawsuit I have filed, to here's a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. It was like 3 weeks, if not faster, in the Pentagon Papers case. It was really fast. It might have been 2 weeks. I have to double check, but it was really, really fast. They went from, geez, I have a lawsuit, to here's your decision by the Supreme Court in like 2 weeks flat. So when the courts really, really want a ball, they can. When they really want to, they can move. They don't normally do it, but, when they're motivated, they break out the whips, baby. They break out the whips, and then it's BDSM time over at the law club. Great times, had by all. Yeah, it was a board of review that's up to a group of officers. Not sure who you appeal to. I don't think you appeal. Well, now, strictly speaking, you could appeal to the court because you've exhausted your administrative remedies. So at this point, I would assume that's the correct answer. So there might be some sort of appeal to the governor or something like that that's administrative. But assuming it's not, which I don't think it is, then the correct appeal would be to file a lawsuit in court to say, well, they didn't give me due process. Which, he's going to lose, but that would be your appeal. Your appeal is to file a lawsuit for deprivation of due process and go fight about it in a court for a while. And the court's not going to intervene unless, again, it's like blatantly wrong. They're going to let the administrative agencies do what they're going to do, particularly as it relates to discipline of their own members. As long as it's basically colorable. So he can appeal, but he'll lose. I'm sure they gave him all the due process he was entitled to. I have no doubt in my mind they gave him all the due process he was entitled to. Lol. Yeah. What else? He's on the defense witness list. He better be. I'll tell you what, man. He absolutely should be on the defense witness list. Now, it doesn't mean the defense is necessarily going to call him, but you bet your ass, if I'm the defense, I'm absolutely putting him on my witness list, and I'm subpoenaing him. You bet your ass, 100%. Cover your bases, man. If you want a witness, you put him on your witness list, and you file a subpoena. Because you never want the state to just be like, we withdraw our subpoena, and then the defense is like, what are we going to do? Right? You file your own subpoena, because of course you do, because you're not an idiot. Of course you do. And whether or not you call them is a whole other set of problems. But if you want that witness, you better subpoena their ass. Otherwise, you're not doing your job right, man. They're calling his sister too? Well, again, whether or not they're calling him or calling her, you don't know, right? The witness list, I assure you, is a lot longer than the number of witnesses they will call. So those aren't quite the same thing. The witness list is the list of people we probably will call. This is the list of people this is the list that we're choosing from in our Choose Our Adventure series of we're going to pick a name out of a hat and call one of these people and we'll tell you who it is. So how many of those people we'll call? Who knows? But yeah. Am I having a great day? I'm having a great day. I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling good and energetic today. I'm feeling lively. The mountains are nice. It is a great day, by the way, in Greenville today. It is just freaking spectacular. The sky is blue with just the right amount of white cloud. I don't like a pure blue sky. It's too jarring. I like a little bit of cloud cover in my day. And we just got some nice wispy clouds, Bob Ross style, painting the scenery. It is beautiful. It's clear. The air is clear. The birds are chirping. I'm feeling good and energetic. Life is good today, man. Life is good. Thank you. I believe my parents' house is very beautiful too. It's a very nice place. Happy little clouds. Happy little clouds for sure. Let me see if I can show you some of the happy little clouds. Hold on. All right, hold on. Ah, yeah. See what I'm talking about? Seeing some happy little clouds up there in the sky? Are you feeling the sky energy? Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Good day for go for a walk? Yeah. $77 today, according to Google? Yeah, they said it might reach 80 today, so that sounds right. That definitely sounds right. 77 sounds correct to me. Sounds correct to me. Love that sky? I know, it's good. It's a good sky, right? It is class A sky. It is awesome sky. 81 in Florida? Yeah. Today is a good day, man. Today is a good day to feel alive, I'll tell you what. Let's see if I can pull up some YouTube comments. This is going to be interesting because I have to do this in a very sort of cumbersome way. But I'm going to try to respond to some YouTube comments. I can't really pull them up the way I'm normally to because I can't really get to YouTube's back end the way I'm doing this. But what I could do is just pull up random videos and read comments that look interesting. So I think I'll do that for a while. My parents are well. Yeah, they're doing okay. My mom just had her birthday and my dad's about to have his birthday. They both have March birthdays, so they're doing reasonably well, all things considered. My mom is a beast, man. She still goes to jazzercise like basically every day of the week. So she's really active. She loves jazzercise. She likes to sweat to the music, man. It's like, and then my dad likes to do shooting. He likes shotgun shooting, skeet in particular. So he likes to get up multiple times a week and do that, and that's fun and exciting hobbies for fun. Yeah. Skeet is fun. That's what I hear. No, I've done skeet before. I've done shotgun shooting. It is fun when you hit that clay. When you hit that clay just right, and it just basically turns into dust. It's very satisfying. Not gonna lie. It's like that instant feedback that you got it exactly right. And so when you get it exactly right and you hit it just so and it turns into dust, it's a good moment, man. It's definitely a good moment. Let's see what's happening in chat. I'm going to go to the one dealing with privilege because I thought there was a comment here that looked pretty good. Question about international airspace. A government says it couldn't do anything due to being international airspace. Doesn't it make international airspace virtually lawless till they get over certain areas? Well, it's maritime law. It's maritime law. When the planes are not within the borders of a country, it's maritime law. And then there's some treaties and stuff on top of that. But your standard answer, it's not lawless, it's maritime law, which isn't quite the same thing. But yeah, it gets down to, it probably gets down to where the plane is registered. Probably. I mean, I'm not the expert on maritime law, but that sounds right. But I know it's maritime law. The plane is doing the maritime law thing, so that's exciting. Okay, this was a good comment in response to the video dealing with privilege doesn't mean the government can do anything. This guy, Bryant, said, hypothetical, a green card MAGA, maybe from Cuba, was at Jan 6. He went to the Capitol, made lots of noise, but he didn't enter the gate. What then? He entered the gate, but not the building. What then? He entered the building, but didn't harm anything. What then? Keep going. At what point should his card be revoked and deported? Should he have to be tried? And I answered this basically saying, well, I'd give the answer you'd expect, and I hold that answer both ways because I don't do hypocrisy. So, again, it doesn't matter to me that, it's a green card holder from MAGA versus, the Columbia student, with his anti-Israel, let's bring on the Muslim caliphate, all that crap. Right, that doesn't matter to me, and that's why we have consistent legal principles, right? So it's like, yeah, I'd give the answer you'd expect. Yeah, the MAGA guy, in your hypothetical, this is a purely hypothetical, so the guy who just went to the Capitol and made some noise, whose green card, we're not going to revoke his green card, and even if he went into the Capitol and did some crimes, that's probably still not sufficient to strip his green card because of the relevant legal standards that apply. So, like, even if he, did some things, unless he did, a violent felony that, is morally turpitude, has moral turpitude, yeah, we're still not going to revoke his green card. It's the same answer either way. It doesn't matter. So it's like, it's fine. It's like, so I said that, and he said, oh, he's just busting your balls. I didn't know if he was trying to catch me out on like a hypocrisy thing, but whatever. Did you read Ludwig versus Washington? I did not. Watkins, the Supreme Court said the act in question precludes judicial review. And I'm like, well, I vaguely remember hearing that before, but I don't know if that's what it said. And so to figure out whether or not what it said, we can go read it real fast, because that sounds like fun. So let's read it real fast and see if we can find out what it said. Ludecke versus Watkins. What a name that is, man. Jeez, you gotta love these names sometimes. People who go to the Supreme Court need to get easier to spell names. That's what I'm just saying. CK versus Watkins. Did I get even close? Close enough. Excellent. All right, so let's see what the Supreme Court said relating to this case. We are dealing with the case of Ludwig versus Watkins, U.S. Supreme Court in 1948. What did the Supreme Court have to say about this issue? Let us read and try to determine whether it matters. All right, under the authority of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which empowers the president whenever there's a declared war, and right away, by the way, you know what the problem is, right? Do I have to keep reading? Like right away, you know what the problem is, right? Whenever there's a declared war between the United States and any foreign country, to provide for the removal of alien enemies from the United States, the President, on July 14th, 1945, directed the removal of all alien enemies deemed by the Attorney General to be dangerous to the public safety. The Attorney General, on January 18th, 1946, ordered removal of the petitioner, a German national from the United States. Challenging the validity of the removal order, petitioner instituted habeas corpus proceedings in the Federal District Court as to release him from the order. Held, the Alien Enemies Act precludes judicial review of the removal order. In circumstances of relation between the United States and Germany, there exists a declared war. You know what the problem is, right? The Alien Enemies Act, construed as permitting resort to courts only to challenge its validity and construction, and to raise questions about the existence of a declared war and of alien enemy status, does not violate the Bill of Rights of the Federal Constitution. The fact that hearings are utilized by the executive to secure an informal basis for the exercise of the summary power conferred in the Act does not empower courts to retry such hearings. Yeah, so, not so much, because there is no declared war between the United States and, like, anyone except, I think, possibly North Korea. I'm not sure that there's any other declared wars that exist right now. So if you're trying to deport a North Korean, okay. Otherwise, not so much. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the rationale talks in the decision talks about, declared war. So whether or not that is a factor, I mean, it's a relevant case. It's on point. But obviously there's no declared war with Venezuela or, any other South American country right now. Maybe there should be, but there isn't. I mean, whether there should be a declared war, yeah, but there isn't a declared war. So this decision from the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't necessarily appear to relate to this case. So I would cite it if I were the administrative branch. I would definitely cite it, but I don't know that I'd necessarily be expected to win. If it covers, I suppose the question is whether the act covers when it's not a declared war. So if it covers when it's not a declared war, then maybe the president's power is summary. Also, by the way, is a green card holder an alien within the meaning of that statute too? I actually don't know. I honestly I don't know whether or not a green card holder is considered to be an alien or not. I don't know. So I guess that's another question. Is a green card holder an alien? So first of all, are they an alien? Second of all, does it have to be a declared war? So those are two exciting questions that definitely could be raised within the meaning of this case. So that's fun and exciting. Does it have to be a national of a nation or simply a foreign national? Well, I'm not sure there's a meaningful difference between those two things. Because even if you're a U.S. citizen, you might still be a citizen of another country, right? So even if you're a U.S. citizen, the fact that you're a national or citizen of another country isn't going to do the trick, because you're a citizen of us. So you're not an alien. You're not an alien because you're our citizen. So whether or not a green card holder is an alien, I don't know. I don't know. Can I ask X? Can I open a new tab and ask X, is a green card holder an alien? Are tourist visa holders aliens? Yes. But green card holder is a different status, right? So a visa, yeah, you're definitely still an alien if you're a visa. You're a lawful alien, you're a legal alien, as opposed to an illegal alien, but you're an alien, sure. Just from a visa? Yeah, that's not going to do the trick. Can I not do X without signing in? So I can't do X right now. That sucks. What is that one called? DeepSeek? Can I sign into that without an account? Ask DeepSeek. Can I do that without an account? No, I can't. Okay, so no answers. I guess I'll just type it into Google generically and see if Google gives me an answer. Is a green card holder an alien? Okay, also known as permanent resident alien permit holder, and green card holder. So the way this is written at CIS suggests the answer is yes. See, we all get to learn things. I know a lot of law, but I don't know all law. Sometimes I have to look things up. But then I learn something, and then I have that information for the future. See, this is how we become smarter, right? It's all good, man. All right. Is there any other authority on this issue? Resident alien. Lawful permanent residents are aliens. Looks like the answer might be yes. They are aliens. Interesting. Yeah, looks like the answers might be yes. Okay, so then I suppose the only other question is whether you have to be in a declared war then. So I suppose that's the only other question. And if not, then maybe the power is summary. So it's not an invalid legal argument. It's not an invalid idea. Good work, chat. You guys got something that might work. Interesting. What happens to a family outside the U.S., say, but all but two are U.S. What the hell? What happens to a family living outside the USA? All but two are U.S. citizens. Two children born in foreign country. The parents are U.S. citizens? If the parents are U.S. citizens, then they became citizens by birth. Yeah. Proctor's family is calling it a wrongful termination? Of course they're saying that. Of course they're saying that. 100%. Of course you know they're saying that. Yeah, he was fired. He's absolutely fired. Yeah, he's fired and all the rest of things and all that shit. So 100% all those things. It's a glorious day for Karen Reed. Okay. Go Yogo 2601 said, I appreciate your point on the green card holder deportation. Now try this. Assume you lied on a material question during the DMV permit. Can they pull your license? And I said, if they can prove it, yeah. Yeah. Someone said Japanese Americans were put into concentration camps, born here. Yeah, that's a great comment. Yes, and I responded to say yes, and that was completely fucked up, and the Supreme Court said so, at least in dicta. Yeah. Oh yeah, we can arrest U.S. citizens who are born here, natural born U.S. citizens. We can arrest them and put into camps. Korematsu, don't you know? I don't think you want to be citing Korematsu. I don't think the Supreme Court has already said in dicta they're not about that Korematsu life. So yeah, that was not exactly one of our better hours as Americans. That was pretty fucked up. In fact, I think it might be the most fucked up case of all time, although it's debatable. Like, you're getting into what is the most fucked up case. Is it Dred Scott? Is it Plessy? I think for my money, I think Korematsu might actually be the most fucked up case. And the reason I say that is because by the time Korematsu came around, it felt like we really should have known better, right? America had a slavery problem, and we had a problem with that when our country was created. But, by the time Korematsu came around, it feels like we really should have known better, and we're still doing the stupid. So for my money, I think Korematsu might be the most fucked up case, but I think it's debatable. We're getting into gradations of bad at that point. Let me know your thoughts about whether or not you think Korematsu is the most fucked up case or not. But I think it might be. Yeah. Someone said if Rob is Wood Daddy, Ian is Leather Daddy, then Kurt will be Watch Daddy. That has some very exciting connotations. Yeah. In a green card's case, the government claims he works for a terrorist organization, so it's a hazard to public safety. Using the driver's license analogy, the state often takes away licenses away for DUI arrests before any due process occurs due to public safety. Do they? I don't think that's right. I mean, I'm pretty sure a court might order the suspension as part of a prima facie, but I don't think they take it away without anything. As a temporary measure, they might take it away while it's pending, but I don't think they would just do it without any due process. That doesn't sound right to my mind. It's like if they're going to take away your driver's license, at least on a permanent basis, I'm pretty sure you're going to need to be convicted of the DUI. Unless there's a conviction of a DUI, I don't think they can take away your driver's license. That doesn't sound right. At least not permanently. Can they revoke it until the court date? Yeah, maybe. Although normally you get a hearing really fast. You're talking about the probable cause hearing. So if you're talking about like even a probable cause hearing, normally you get that like basically next day. So maybe the probable cause is enough to determine it on a temporary basis. But I think you would need some sort of court action. Okay, this was good. By Tactic Angel. Said, honestly, your license analogy has pushed me in the other direction. If a privilege is given based on good behavior and it can be denied for bad behavior, then you more or less seem to articulate the same sentiment as the Secretary of State. In effect, if you got a DUI before applying for a driver's license versus a DUI while in possession of a license, the result is presumably similar. In the case of permission to be in the United States, Rubio would just be substituting advocacy in support of a terrorist group, unless we're okay with people doing that outside the United States, then allowing them to enter, which we might be, but hopefully certainly not. All right, so this is an interesting comment, and I think gets the point slightly off. So the issue there is not the driver's license as such. The issue there is the due process and equal protection is the thing. And again, the rules and regulations for that are spelled out in the statute and in the regs. So, different states might have different rules about exactly what triggers what. And even if there was a state that said, like, the mere ticket of a DUI suspended your driver's license, even if that was a rule in some state, which seems wrong, but let's suppose it's true just to make the argument. So the mere fact that, you got arrested for DUI is enough to, like, suspend your thing until the hearing. Like, even if that was the rule, that's the rule that's spelled out in advance. See, it's not arbitrary, right? It's not, I'm just doing it because this guy. I'm doing it because it's the rule. The rule is spelled out in the statute. The rule is spelled out in the reg. The rule is spelled out. And what you're entitled to is, among other things, due process and equal protection of those rules. So if that makes more sense, right? So within the context of the green card, like what the rules could be, right, and what the rules are not the same thing. So because they can suspend your driver's license for reason X doesn't mean that same reason is a reason to suspend your fishing license, doesn't mean it's the same reason to suspend, whatever, right? And it doesn't mean it's the same thing for the green card. So the green card rules are spelled out in the green card statute and the accompanying federal rules, right? But what you're fundamentally entitled to is the equal protection and due process protection of those rules. And so the Secretary of State can't just say, I'm doing it because reasons. They need to cite authority for those. And then we talked about some of those authorities and what those might be. But there's still rules, even if the rules can be, in the case of a declared war, even if the rules are fairly plenary, it's still something. And even if it's plenary, it's still equal application of the plenary, right? So that's sort of more the point, I suppose, in some ways, rather than, so the analogy, like all analogies, break down. A green card is not a driver's license. A green card is not a visa. A green card is not a fishing license. A green card isn't any of these things. A green card is a green card, and it comes with its own set of rules, regulations, processes, procedures, and so forth and so on. And in terms of what the rules could be, theoretically, in terms of what Congress could pass, is a whole other set of discussions. But they pass something. The rules are something. And so until they're changed, that's the thing, right? So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Did I hear about the medical doctor professor that's deported upon return to the U.S.? He was held for 36 hours at the airport and then deported. He had a valid H-1B visa. Well, an H-1B visa is not a green card, right? So again, different rules, different process. So that's not the same posture. What else? Those are basically some things. So those are some good comments. Anything from our chat here today? Okay, nothing else in chat at the moment. Let me pull up a different thing and see if there's any comments I want to respond to. I'm having way too much fun sitting out here in the sun, let me tell you what. And I have a battery that actually has battery life into it, so I probably can stream for a while till the battery dies, because I don't have a battery that's on the verge of death anymore. Outstanding. Let's see if there's anything with respect to the AutoPen scandal, stupid, that I want to respond to. Someone said, the way I figure it, if a president can or can't declassify a document with a word, then he can or can't pardon with a word. Pick your poison, but be consistent. To which I responded that if your argument is the president might be able to just make a pardon orally, then you might be right. The Constitution simply says he has a power to pardon. It doesn't say it has to be in writing. So can the president merely by speaking it, can he create a pardon merely by the words? Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it's ever been tried, but possible. So it's a reasonable legal argument. And incidentally, by the way, just because the president can classify or declassify with a word doesn't necessarily mean the president can just do anything else with a word. Again, you have to look at what he's trying to do and the rules relating thereto. So you can't necessarily say because one context, therefore all contexts. That's dumb, right? That's not how that works, right? Just because I have a driver's license doesn't mean I have a license to fly a plane, right? So it's like, oh, I can drive a car, therefore I can drive a plane. That's definitely not how that works. Calatius111 said, if one is deemed incompetent to stand trial, like the case with her report, can one sign legal documents or legal contracts? I genuinely don't know. Good question. Depends on the nature of what you're signing, incidentally, by the way. So the standard for competence isn't necessarily universal either. For example, the competence to sign a will is generally seen as very low bar. It's a very low bar. So you could be competent for one purpose and not competent for another purpose. That's completely possible. And also, as I pointed out, the Constitution sets out the rules for being president. Unfortunately, one of those rules is not you have to be competent. The 25th Amendment gives power to the cabinet to remove the president for lack of competence, but they actually have to do it. So just because he's incompetent doesn't necessarily mean he can't sign legal documents as the president, because, well, the president is defined by the Constitution, which comes with its own rule set. So yes, we're in the position where you could argue that he couldn't sign a contract, but he could sign a pardon. That's the kind of thing that you do when you go to law land. Welcome to law land, where things get fun and exciting. You can't sign a contract, you can sign a pardon. That could be the answer. That's how much law is fun. That's why law is a good time. Logan Ryman said, regarding green card guy, does it have any importance on the issue that he's on video being involved with taking over a building on college campus, which invokes vandalism? For my money, no, I don't think so. If he's convicted, maybe. But just because he did it, no. I think you have to convict him first. And even then, whether or not that's sufficient grounds to revoke a green card, you'd have to look again to the regulations. As best as I can determine, it would only be relating to felonies that imply moral turpitude, I think. But beyond that, no. Of course, fraud in obtaining the green card, but that wasn't the question. There would need to be a hard copy documentation to deliver to the incarcerating parties as well as relative judicial entities. I mean, someone's going to have to reduce it to writing at some point. Yeah, someone's going to have to reduce it to a written document for the mere sake of being able to file it. But whether or not it has to be written in the first place is not the same thing, right? We were talking about this the other day when we talked about the president authorizing someone to sign for him, right? And we talked about an affidavit after the fact as not being the same thing as a written authorization in advance, right? Same idea, right? So do you need written authorization? Does the president need written authorization to say, sign for me? As best as I can determine, no, he doesn't. If I have enough, if I wanted to be able to prove it, how would I prove it? Well, I might be able to get an affidavit from the president that said I authorized it. But the affidavit is evidence of the oral permission. It's not the same thing as the written grant because it came after the fact. So same thing with a pardon. Can the president just speak it into existence? Maybe. Does it have to be reduced into writing in some way in order to be filed in court? Yes. Does the fact that it's reduced in writing make the pardon itself the written thing or evidence of the thing? Is it the thing or is it evidence of the thing? Right? So that's where the distinction there, if that makes sense. How about my theory that you need a lawyer to interpret the law and the judicial branch very well understands this? Well, I don't think for the most part that's true. You know, for the most part, I don't think it's as true as people think it might be. I think most laws really are fairly pretty common sense. And if they're not common sense, they're probably going to give you a warning about it before they, whack you upside the head. I think most laws, when you really think them through, are kind of just like are logical and reasonable, and kind of boil down to the silver rule is always a good rule. Don't do unto others what you wouldn't want have done unto you. If you wouldn't want someone to do it to you, don't do it to someone else. Right? That's a pretty good rule. Right? And so it's like just most laws I don't think are as complicated as you want them to be. We can dance on the edges of some laws, and God knows we do. But I think for the most part, just be nice to other people, respect them, treat them well, respect other people's private property. Don't be a complete dick, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. It's mostly fine. Okay, this one is interesting too, because this one was interesting because Rubio was citing this, and I don't know if this is the same thing. I think this is a different thing. But Title 8, Chapter 12, Subchapter 12, Part 5, 1227. By the way, incidentally, when you're citing statutes, you don't have to cite it that way. It's fine. But you could have just said 8 USC 1227. It would have been fine. You didn't need to say chapter, subchapter, part. You could have just said 8 USC 1227, just a FYI. But this is fine too. Which says, an alien whose presence or activities in the United States, the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe would have potential serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States is deportable. It's like, well, okay, that's a statute though. And so the interpretation of that statute is a legal question. And so I don't know whether or not the case we read earlier reads onto that or not, but I do know it's a legal question. And what does the Secretary of State have to show, or what do they have to do, right? So the fact the court is asking the question is particularly fine, and the interpretation of that is a legal question. Just like it was, incidentally, with the Alien Enemies Act when the Supreme Court, right? That was a legal question. Can the president deport this German when we're at war with Germany? Can they do that? That's a legal question. Supreme Court's like, yep, no problem. And that was the legal answer. But it's still a legal question. So, all those things. Oh, yeah, this was a good comment. Hey, you voted for him? To which I simply responded... sure I did, but that doesn't mean I necessarily support everything he does and says. That would be dumb. If you support everything, that a politician you vote for says and does, I don't think you're necessarily doing it right. Lol. Yeah, it's like, yes, I voted for Trump. Yes, generally speaking, I like him. I still retain the right to critique him, criticize him, and say that what he's doing isn't necessarily legal all the time. These are not mutually inconsistent things. So it's like, yes, this is fine. And politically, I like what he's doing. Like, for example, there was that order from the judge who, as I sort of read it, I was skimming it, basically said, yeah, you can't close USAID. It's like you can't just shutter the doors and you can't just shut the thing down. You can't just shut it down. It's like, yeah, okay. Now, as to whether or not that judge is right, I don't know. But, like, that's not, like, wholly invalid. You know, there are statutes that exist that create agencies, and Congress allocates money, and, you know, so forth and so on. And so, you know, it's legal interpretation. So, you know, whether that judge, you know, is interpreting the law correctly or not, I don't know off the top of my head. But, you know, it's a legal question. Can the president just shut down USAID? Can he just not spend money? You know, those are legal questions. That's what courts are for. That's what they do with their time. Just Live in Peace said, from what I hear, according to the Constitution, the president needs to be present at the signing. Nope. MS Pie said, how does your analysis compare to voter ID law and restrictions? Who can assist a handicapped person even to mail in ballot? Seems like it's easier to sell property pardon than vote. It may be, it may not be. Again, they're like completely separate questions. The one doesn't read on to the other, necessarily. They don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. And it's not necessarily clear they should have anything to do with each other. Right? So it's like, is it harder to vote than it is to grant a pardon? Yeah, maybe. That doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be. I mean, obviously, with the respect to a pardon, only one person can do it. Trying to figure out who can vote is a tricky question. Like, voter ID laws at their core are trying to determine whether or not this person can vote. We don't have to determine whether or not this guy's president. We know he's president. So, like, the analogy doesn't quite work to my mind. It doesn't seem on point. Am I familiar with the U.S. Peace Institute being shuttered by Doge? None in particular. But they're nonprofit? Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I don't know about the specifics of what Doge is or not doing. I haven't watched, you know, with extreme detail. Yeah. Terrorist activity. If he asked and didn't tell the truth in his application for the green card, yeah, that's grounds to revoke. 100%. If he lied in his application, and they can prove it, to what standard, I'm not sure. Probably clear and convincing if I had to guess. But if they can prove it, probably to clear and convincing, then they can revoke his green card and they can deport him. No problem. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But it's like, just because they can do it for that reason with those procedures doesn't mean they can do it for any reason with any procedures. Right? That's more the point. And like, should it be easier to revoke a green card? Maybe. I don't know. But, you know, that's more of a policy question than a legal question. Maybe Congress should have passed different laws. But they passed the laws they passed, and so I'm going to interpret those for a while. You know what I mean? Doge doesn't shut anything down. They just suggest to be shut down. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, I mean, whether or not it's Doge that's shutting it down or not, let's just say that the executive branch is shutting USAID down to avoid the problem. Okay, we'll summarize it that way, because that avoids the problem. The executive branch tried to shut down USAID. Can they do that? Under what conditions? Can the executive branch not spend money? And so forth and so on. So we'll take it out of Doge and just take it to the executive branch and call it a day. What else is going on? With respect to the previous video with the Karen Reid hearing on March 18th, Bev is threatening and chastising the defense, yet we watch Hank lie and manipulate and obfuscate day to day without any affidavits from Hank, yet he's good to go. Yeah, this is the upside down. In Bev court, everything is gaslighting. like its own alternative reality. Preach. Bryant said there can be a huge chasm between correct and good. True. Yeah, just because it's correct doesn't necessarily mean it's good. That's fair. Also, haven't laws on even most basic counseling before providing an abortion been struck down on First Amendment? Not if they're related to the medical procedure themselves, they're not. If they're not like just general information relating to it. So if the nature of the regulation with respect to abortion is to give them information, I believe, generally speaking, those are upheld. For example, if they have to take an ultrasound before doing an abortion, I believe a lot of those have been upheld. Not necessarily all, because again, you're going to get on state-by-state issues on this. But a lot of those have been upheld because it's compelled speech within the practice of medicine, as opposed to, let me hand you a pamphlet about, whatever bullshit. So, yeah. So not necessarily. So you can, in some situations, force medical speech. Yeah. Because in that situation, by the way, it's not the person speaking speech, incidentally, is one of the reasons, right? So if the doctor is required to give medically correct information, it's not the doctor's speech. Like, it's not a product of the doctor's mind. Right? They're saying the words, but it's not their speech. So that also goes a long way. That isn't to say that the doctor can't speak. It is to say in that specific situation, they may not be speaking because it's not a product of their mind. So that is also a distinction that's partially worth mentioning. It doesn't get you completely past the compelled speech analysis, but it helps. In professional opinion versus just an opinion? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. Because if you're talking about the regulation of the practice of medicine, the government could definitely prevent the doctor from giving certain opinions as not being medically valid. So again, the guy comes in and says, I don't want my arm. I don't think it belongs. I want to saw off my own arm because I think it feels foreign to me. I want to hack it off. And there are people like that. Then the state can prevent the doctor from saying, you should do that because it's not medically valid. So, and insert your own thing. And then someone, at least in one of the chats I saw, said, well, so they can't hack off their own arms, but they can hack off their own genitals. It's like, yeah, because within the confines of this state that we're talking about, whatever hypothetical this is, the state has determined in this hypothetical that hacking off your genitals is a valid medical treatment, but hacking off your limbs isn't. And so, despite the fact that that might seem to be a bit irrational, I mean, that's the determination. And, there's a rational reason to believe that. You can split the difference between those two things because, in the one case, we're affirming your inherent gender identity versus the other. It's a delusion. Whether that means someday that doctors will be recommending hacking off arms to further your, body image, it's a whole other set of problems. But you can slice the difference even if the slice is a bit unsatisfying. And different states can disagree about what's valid medicine. So some state theoretically could say hacking off your limb is a valid medical choice, because that would be within the nature of the state level power. If it's state level power, the state is sovereign, and the sovereign can do no wrong. So the sovereign can choose. Now, whether that's a king versus a legislature in concert with the governor, in concert with courts, in concert with ballot initiatives, in concerts with the people voting. The mechanism by which the sovereign acts is not the same thing as what the sovereign can do, right? So That's another thing that's worthy of mentioning. Like when you're talking about the concept of sovereignty, and the sovereign can do no wrong, you know, we have complicated it by changing it from being a king to being this, mechanism with flow charts and, lines and arrows and all the things and the people voting and all the rest of things. But like, assuming that you do the flow chart thing, whatever it is, assuming you do the flow chart thing, then the sovereign has acted and the sovereign can do no wrong. So the sovereign's power is still basically absolute, because that's in the nature of sovereignty. And then we create checks and balances to stop ourselves from the stupid, but that's a whole other set of problems. And then, of course, on the state level, when you're talking about the state of Texas versus the state of Florida versus Virginia, for example, when you're talking about that sovereignty is then at least partially given to the federal government. So that is what we talked about when we talk about splitting the atom of sovereignty. So part of that absolute power was given to the federal government, but only part of it. And so, again, if you find federal power, it can prevent the state from acting because part of the sovereignty was given to the federal government. And so if you find that constitutional hook, then that can interfere with the state level government because we split the level of sovereignty, we split the atom of sovereignty, and welcome to federalism. It's fun and exciting and complicated sometimes. Since the state decided what's valid medical advice, not the doctor, that's the state's power. Yeah, this is not a problem. The state has the power to determine what is valid medical advice because the state is sovereign. The doctor has a license given by the state. The ability of the doctor to practice medicine is sort of fundamentally at the state's largesse. Now, again, once they have defined those rules within their statutes, once they define those rules and regulations, they have to provide equal protection. But like from first principles, they don't necessarily need to have any particular rules. And the state legislature can just be like, yeah, this is not medicine. Congratulations. And that's the end of that discussion. The legislature can override the doctor. It's in the nature of sovereignty. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. That means they can force the doctor to give medical advice based on political opinion. Well, not quite political opinion, but whether or not it's valid medicine, which might be partially political, because sometimes it is political. So it's not quite one and the same, but there's a bit of overlap. Alabama Rose in chat says the term incidental or ancillary refers to an event that occurs as a result of another event or unanticipated effect. Incidental proceedings are those related to the main action, but incidental are as a result to the unintentional act. The meaning of the term incidental may vary in subjects. When dealing with procedural law, it may include procedural nature, but when it's used concerning an agreement, it may mean something more. The main objective of incidental proceedings is to give some relaxed to the parties of the suit in certain cases where the court finds it concerning circumstances. Yeah. Part 3.2 considers incidental proceedings which may be granted in matters such as death, marriage, insolvency, withdrawal, compromise, and commission. Yeah. Yeah. All kinds of good stuff. This is also, by the way, exactly why the anti-federalists wanted certain things codified in the Bill of Rights. And they were damn right, weren't they? This is exactly why they want certain things codified in the Bill of Rights. We don't need a Bill of Rights. It's all going to be from the structural mechanism. The legislature will never go too far. The anti-federalists were like, yeah, we're not buying that bullshit. We want certain things specified in the Bill of Rights. This is exactly why we put certain things in the Bill of Rights, to prevent the sovereign, who can do no wrong, from just changing it on a whim. To make it a little bit, the sovereign still can change it, In this context, the sovereign would be the people collectively, through the legislature or through the people ballot initiative, and then, doing the constitutional amendment thing. So the sovereign can still change it. We just made it hard so that the sovereign just can't do it on a whim because we didn't trust the sovereign, and we were right. We didn't trust ourselves, which was also correct. We're dumb. Unpopular opinion on the Colorado situation from the parent of a gay child. The child alone deserves to process their own sexuality, whether straight, gay, or in combination. Why do parents or therapists get to decide that for another future adult? The psychologist is somewhat medical, being the damages caused relating to understanding. If the child is told by a psychologist they aren't gay, shouldn't be gay, would that expose the therapist to medical malpractice? Possible. Perhaps we should just stay out of the personal choice of identity and encourage them to just be a kid. Pretty sure that would be the best outcome for anyone. Yeah, I mean, the only real objection I have to that, really, like in first principles, is again because of my belief, which I certainly believe to be true. In my heart of hearts, I believe to be true that some of the LGBTQ plus is social contagion. And I believe in some cases that it could be possible to make a kid not be LGBTQ, and in that situation, it would be a good thing to do. So that is my caveat to that. But that's my thoughts on the issue. In terms of from a policy perspective. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not taking a position that some aren't born that way. What percentage are born that way, I think, is an interesting question, but I'm definitely not taking a posture that it's not possible. Although I still don't even know from their perspective, and we don't really have to get into this, but in terms of like a biological man who says, I'm a woman, it's like, what does that actually even mean? And no one can define this question, or no one can define it. And it's like, it's very weird, because I don't know how to deal with this. It's like, how would I know whether or not I feel like a woman? What does that mean to feel like a woman? Right? What does that mean? Is there criteria that I can go through to figure out whether or not I feel like a woman or feel like a man? I don't know. I don't know what that would be. So it's very confusing to me. It's like, I feel like, I believe I'm a woman. It's like, cool, why? And the answers are very unsatisfactory. But that's just me. Yeah, they say gender stereotypes, which is interesting because a lot of the feminist movement was specifically related to there shouldn't be gender stereotypes. Am I not right? Well, wasn't a lot of feminism rooted in there shouldn't be like male roles and women can do anything men can do, and women can act any way men can act, and women can think any way a man can think? Wasn't that a lot of rooted in feminism, is like the idea that gender stereotypes are kind of dumb, and if you just because you don't conform to a gender stereotype doesn't make you a woman? Wasn't that a whole thing? So, like, how can you then go appeal back to gender stereotypes? It's like, wait a second. I thought we got rid of those in the name of feminism. Are we going back? I'm confused. The whole thing is confusing to me. It doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't work. The logic doesn't logic. Yeah. That's a fun one. They say a woman is someone who thinks they're a woman. I hear that a lot when, conservatives pose this question. That's like, do you know what a tautology is? Do you know what circular reasoning is? That doesn't help me. That does not help me. Yeah. Gali May said, I've said this for years. We don't have a justice system, we have a legal system. So many cases are decided with emotion, not real law. If you're talking about like juries are people. And that's kind of unavoidable. Yeah, the answer is that we may want a justice system, but we need a legal system. Yeah. And like, of course, justice informs what law is. And when you see, but it's like, yeah, it's again, it's not saying the rules can't be wrong. The rules absolutely can be wrong. It's saying that if you see a problem, right? If you get to the end and the answer sucks, one of two things is true. Either you didn't follow the rules correctly, or you did and the answer still sucks. So assuming that you followed it correctly and the answer still sucks, then you're like, okay, there's a problem somewhere because I followed the rules and I got to the end and it sucks. So like what I'm saying isn't the rules are always right or the rules are, I'm saying when you're trying to change the rule, try to think about it systematically. Try to think about it. How do I fix this problem without special pleading? How do I not just do but this one time, because that never ends well? How do I fix this guy's problem and also not break everything else in the process? How can I do this? And you're not going to get it completely right because that would imply that you could create a perfect rule. And we already know you're going to not do that because the rule wasn't perfect to start with. But you're going to try. It's like just use your thinking parts. Try to think it through. Try to think through all the implications, and try to figure out how you can revise the rule in a way that solves this guy's problem without making everything worse. Try not to send everything to hell while you're fixing the problem. That's all I'm talking about. Yeah. The biggest contention is when a legal principle runs headfirst into a brick wall of rational reality. This is Cycleboy8028 said this. If someone's wrongfully convicted, new evidence proves innocent, not guilty, then adhering to legal process is a violation of reality. That sounds like a mental disease. New process, a higher court review panel to see if a legal principle needs to be sidelined to reality. Yeah, and it's just like trying to think that through. Like we've reached a problem, we've gone to the end, and the answer sucks. We've gotten to the end, and we have a guy who's actually innocent, who's been decided actually innocent, still serving time in prison. This is not good. And so it's like, okay, how do we want to solve this problem? And what exactly are the rules relating to this? So that we don't just solve this guy's problem, we solve it in all future cases. Hopefully, right? It's like, and it's just trying to think it through in a more systematic way. Just trying to, try to think about how this affects things beyond the immediate. Trying to think about the consequences. There's enough unintentional consequences as there are. Okay? All I'm trying to say is try to think it through as best as you can. Try to think through the consequences. Try to reason out as much as you can. Try to find the answer that works. And, when you do that, then go do that. And inevitably, when it goes wrong, then do all that over again. Just try to think it through. I'm not going to think of everything. You're not going to think of everything. We're going to try. We're going to do our best. All right, I think those are all the comments for now. I don't think there are any more comments. So I think I'm going to end the stream unless there's anything more. I told my husband since men's can have periods, it was his turn this month. Cute. Oh, I heard the JFK files were released. Was there anything inside? While you guys are typing that, I assume the answer is no. Something else I was thinking about recently was the capsule that just came back with the people in space that were there for 9 months. They were supposed to be there for, 10 days or something? Longest 10 days ever, I'll tell you what. If I'm one of those astronauts, I tell you what my first act is. I tell you what my first thing when I come back is. I resign. That's my first step when I get off that craft. I quit. Leave me the fuck alone. But maybe that's just me. But the other thing I was thinking about was how it didn't seem like the news media was generally covering the story. It wasn't getting a lot of press from the mainstream media. And that's just really weird to me. The whole story about the people being up in space wasn't really covered, and then the whole process of the rescue wasn't really covered. Not like you would expect it to be, not like the kind of media you would think this story would get. And it can only be, and you have to conclude, or at least I concluded for that matter, I don't know if you have to, but I concluded that, they didn't bring the story initially because it happened under Biden. So we can't talk about the story because it happened under Biden. And we can't talk about it now because Musk is the one that saved him, and we can't give Musk any credit. You know with 100% certainty, if something about that had gone wrong and an astronaut had died, the story, the media would be covering that story till the end of time. But, because it all went right, they're not going to talk about it, and they're not going to give Musk any credit. And so I guess my hatred for the mainstream media grew a little bit, is basically the end of that discussion. My hatred for the mainstream media sucks. There's a bee friend. I don't know if it's fish bee, but there's a bee friend, and he's hovering, and I don't know if I like bee friend. I'm not sure if he's related to bee fish, but he's hovering near me and doing things. He's not buzzing in the ocean, I take note. So I assume he's buzzing in the air, not in the ocean. So he's probably not a bee fish. Bee fish sightings continue to elude me. You need to understand how a bumblebee ended up on a can of tuna? That's a good question. That is a very good question. Maybe the Bumblebee Tuna Company was ahead of the curve the whole time. Maybe they knew something we didn't know long ago. Is it really tuna in those cans? Thoughts that I didn't know I had. Bee fish watches, ETA, I think it's going to be a lot faster than 1 to 2 years. I think it's going to be like 2 months, maybe, till we have our first bee fish watch. I was trying to decide what I want to make. I was trying to decide what I want to make. I was thinking, do I just make a Submariner clone? Do I make maybe I make a chronograph? That could be fun. And what kind of watch do I want to make? Maybe something with a moon face? That could be fun. I don't know. I'm not sure what the first watch is going to be. Let me know if you have any suggestions for what the first watch should be. What's a moon face? Moon phase. Moon phase. Some wrist watches have the moon, and it shows you what phase the moon is in. It goes through the entire lunar cycle, so you can look at the watch and you can see what phase the moon is in. It's not a very practical complication, but it's kind of cool. It's such a nice day outside. The birds are chirping. The bees are buzzing. I got birds and bees. You got birds and bees. I'm not sure if that means something. Yeah, so you could do like a chronograph. You could do a calendar. You could do day dates. You could do a diving style watch, a field style watch. You could do like a pilot's watch. You can do lots of things. You can do automatic. You can do quartz. Update on Kurt's prescription troubles. At the moment, there are no prescription troubles. If you're referring to the prior approval, I haven't heard relating back to that, nor do I expect to in the immediate future. Or the exception, rather. But no, I haven't heard anything relating to that yet. Befriend is bothering me. All right, I'm gonna head inside before Befriend decides to like land on me or something and freak me out. I've been enjoying our stream together. This has been fun. Michael Proctor is gone. The Karen Reed trial is going to be lit. The excitement is real. It's all kinds of fun. I've been Uncivil Law. Until later, my friends. I hope all's well. Cheers for now, my friends, and goodbye.